Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's service. Today's message is called Freedom Comes at a Price, Don't Return to Slavery. Okay, so it's funny how we use the expression good morning, good afternoon, good evening. They are really a declaration of faith. Faith that the morning is good or will be good. No one ever greets you with the expression bad morning, etc. We might even say morning without good. Without the good, but we are acknowledging that it is the morning, etc. Even if the morning is not particularly a good one. We know it is morning, we have no doubt. We can see it is morning and the effects of morning. We wake up after sleeping without thinking that we actually woke up. We take it for granted. Today's message, as I said, is called Freedom Comes at a Price, Don't Return to Slavery. I think you, like me, take a lot of things for granted and often don't think or thank God for even the little things that He provides for us. The world at large does not think or thank God for the little things because they don't acknowledge His involvement in the world. Thanks to social media, people are becoming more self-centered than ever before, and it's a slow process at first, but then seems to consume people. We take for granted we can pick up the phone and call anyone with the number we have. We book flights, we pay bills, etc., and take advantage of it. But what if the internet failed? Or we didn't have phones? What would we do then? Well, I've got news for you. The world existed before telephones and the internet. We can live without them. But whether it's technology or anything else, we do take them for granted. It becomes part of our lives. We become slaves to success and other things. But we don't realize we are in slavery or bondage, and then we may not want to leave the bondage because freedom comes at a price that we might not be willing to pay. We're going to look at a part of the account of the Israelites today, quite a long reading. It's Exodus chapter 5 chapter 5 to chapter 6 verse 9, and then chapter 7 verses 1 to 6. The people of Israel were under bondage. They were slaves to the Egyptians. Why? When they'd gone down to Egypt, they were 70 in number, and they lived happily in Goshen. We read in Exodus chapter 1 verse 7 to 10, "But the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied, and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them. Now a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, 'Behold, the people of the sons of Israel are too many and mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them. Otherwise they will multiply, and in the event of war, they will also join those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land.'" What kind of thinking was that? They hadn't done it before. They had enemies for a long time, and they'd never risen up against them. But Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, instilled fear into his people. And it's worth remembering that things come down from the top, not from the bottom. He was the top of the chain, as it were. He poisoned the minds of the people, of his people, against the Israelites. Satan used him to poison the minds of the people. Why did he do this? Because he wanted to be in control, and because he didn't fear God, he did not acknowledge God. Egypt was built by Israel. They were forced to make bricks. I find it interesting that they made bricks. Way back then, they knew how to make bricks to build houses and temples. Why people think we're more intelligent now, I have no idea. They used the resources they had to construct things. But Pharaoh used fear to change the hearts of the people. Things have not changed. Doctors, governments, etc. will use fear to change the hearts of the people who don't have a strong foundation in God. We should always be looking to the Word of God for our answers. God is the one who created the world and us. He knows how it works, and how we work better than anyone else. We need God's wisdom, not our own. When fear is the major factor for a change of mind or heart, we have to question where that fear comes from and what the desired results will be. Ask the questions. Who are the pharaohs in my life? Up until that point, the Israelites had it fine and dandy. They took life for granted. Maybe they'd forgotten the promise of God. Life was good. We read their accounts of life in Egypt when they had been delivered, all the lovely food they had, and they wanted to turn back to a life of oppression rather endure the process to freedom. I used to work for a brief time with a ministry that worked with drug addicts to help them overcome their addictions. They were slaves to the addiction, slaves to the drugs. These people would inject these drugs, which were not pure, mixed with all kinds of things like talcum powder, etc., into their veins. You ask the question, why would someone willingly inject something like that into their veins with maybe a dirty needle or in a dirty environment? A lot of these people would then turn to prostitution, robbery, whatever it took to get money to buy these drugs. A wretched life of slavery. Most of the users are not rich celebrities who can also become addicts, but they have the resources to keep buying it or to sober up, but still they are slaves to it. In this ministry, people had to go cold turkey. It took a few days and it was torture for them. And many of them were able to live a drug-free life for about 6 months maximum. They wanted the leeks of Egypt. Why? Because freedom comes at a price. You see, a lot of the non-celebrity people had problems that they could not face that led them down the drugs road. And when they cleaned up, their problems were right there waiting to assail them again. And they would rather be in slavery to drugs than to live in the freedom and confront the problems of what they had before. Many of them self-inflicted, unfortunately. It was such a heartbreaking thing to see. They couldn't confront the fears, so they returned to slavery, to drugs. It may not be drugs that you're a slave to, but most people are a slave to something. We have been bought with a price. Our freedom cost the life of Jesus Christ, who gave up his freedom to become the sacrifice for our slavery. Freedom comes at a price. Okay, we can read about the Israelites in Exodus chapter 5 to 6 verse 9 and chapter 7 verse 1 to 7. It's quite long. I think I'm not going to read it. You can read it afterwards, okay? I'm going to read a few verses of it, okay? So, and afterwards Moses and Aaron came to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord of Israel says. Let my people go so that they may celebrate a feast to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and besides, I will not let Israel go." And then they said, "The God of the Hebrews has met us. Please let us go 3-day journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord. Otherwise he will strike us with the plague or with the sword." But the king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why do you let the people neglect their work? Get back to your labors." And again Pharaoh said, "Look, the people of the land are now many, and you would have them cease their labors?" So the same day Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters over the people and the foremen, saying, "You are no longer to give the people straw to make bricks as previously. Have them gather straw for themselves, but you should impose on them the same quota of bricks which they were making before. You are not to reduce any of it, because they are lazy. For this reason they cry out, 'Let's go and sacrifice to our gods.' Let the labor be heavier on the men and have them work at it so they will pay no attention to false words." Okay, so they carried on and they made them go and get the straw. So maybe the Egyptians thought it was a terrible thing, but they were under the control of Pharaoh. Okay, so they let the fear of Pharaoh interrupt their freedom to think for themselves. This is not a good thing. Remember, Pharaoh was one person over the whole of Egypt. So the whole of Egypt could have said, "No, Pharaoh, this is not a good thing. We will not do it." But they feared Pharaoh. So they did what he told them to do, even though it wasn't right. And this is what happens, and it all happens. I can think of, unfortunately, in the land of Germany, they feared Hitler, so they did things that they knew that wasn't right. Mankind, when they're in the bondage of fear, do things that they know isn't right, but they won't stand up against it because they don't know that they realize that freedom comes at a price. So I'm going to read verse 15. Then the foreman of the sons of Israel, this is after they've been told to build with straw, they went and cried out to Pharaoh, "Why do you deal this way with your servants?" Okay, and he said, "You are lazy, very lazy. For this reason you say, 'Let's go and sacrifice to the Lord.' Now go back to work." Okay, so then what happens? The foremen and the sons of Israel saw that they were in trouble, since they were told, "You must not reduce your daily amount of bricks." Then they went, and when they left Pharaoh, they met with Moses and Aaron as they were waiting for them. And they said to them, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you, because you made us repulsive in Pharaoh's sight." Okay, and to put a sword in our hands to kill us. Is this new? Is this something new? When something happens, when we're fighting for the Lord, people will say, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you because you've made us repulsive." Guess what? Living in the world, we are repulsive to the world because we seek to follow God. And people will not understand, and they will say, "May the Lord look upon you and judge you. Okay, this is what people are saying in their hearts when they see the work of the cross. May the Lord look at you and repulse you, because they do not want to leave slavery, the slavery that the world imposes on them, because freedom comes at a price. So it continues, and God has to remind them. He says in verse 6 of chapter 6, "Say therefore to the sons of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the labours of the Egyptians, and I will rescue you from their bondage. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. Then I will take you as my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord, the God who brought you out from under the labours of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land which I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord." So he's reminding them that he will always fulfill his promises, not in a way that we might expect, but in the way that he will deliver. So the Lord brought them out, okay, and we know how he did it. And if you don't know, read the account in Exodus, okay. So the Lord had told Abraham many years before that the people who would be his descendants would be captive in the land for 400 years. So we can read that in Genesis 15 verse 13. Genesis 15 verse 13. Then God said to Abraham, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in the land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years." Did you get that? 400 years. So it wasn't a new thing when God delivered them out of Egypt. They had been there 400 years. Maybe they had forgotten God. Maybe they had assumed the life of those living around them. When we read the Bible, we sometimes forget that the accounts written all didn't happen in one day, because we've got it and it's like, oh, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. No, 400 years. The Israelites cried out to God, "Please free us." Probably not just once, but over a long period of time. But God waited for the right time to demonstrate his glory and his power. He waited for the right time when the Israelites and the Egyptians and the then known world would realize that he alone is God, and salvation can come by no other name or no other God. Just as today, salvation comes through no other name than Jesus Christ of Nazareth, the Son of God, the only Son of God. God made flesh, who dwelt amongst us. You may think 400 years was a long time to wait, but think how long God had to wait to bring salvation to the world through his Son, Jesus Christ. When it was the right time, politically, socially, geographically, economically, etc., and to fulfill his promise at the time in history that would benefit the whole world, the whole of mankind. God had to wait from the time that Adam fell to bring in Jesus through the promises Every time he was telling his people, this is going to happen through the prophecies, through everything, God had to wait around 4,000 earth years to bring us the ultimate freedom from the slavery and bondage of sin. 4,000 years. But unfortunately, people would rather live in the bondage of Egypt, as it were, which is a picture of the world. The Israelites didn't just up and leave. First, God had to deal with Pharaoh and the Egyptians, who were the taskmasters over Israel. I often wonder how it happened. One day the Israelites were living in freedom and the next they were captives. That too surely didn't happen overnight. But during their years of oppression, acceptance of the situation must have crept in too, because it became their way of life. They accepted it. They could see no way out of it. They cried out to God. But were they ready to be set free? Sometimes we cry out to God, but are we ready to be set free? God always does things at the exact time, at the exact right time. And when we learn that, we can then walk in the freedom of knowing we will be free. It's not our timing, it's always God's timing. If it were our timing, then God would not be God. We would not recognize him for who he is, and we would have him at our beck and call. It's not like that. We were created for him and by him for his glory, and not the other way round. The Israelites forgot that. Even when he delivered them from the power of Egypt, they forgot that. When the going was tough, because of their rebellion, they forgot that. And it got to the point where Moses even let the situation overtake him. He even complained, and so did Joshua. Freedom always comes at a price. God was willing to pay that price for us through Christ. Through Israel, he showed us what freedom means. Leave Egypt behind when you come to the promised land. He delivered them miraculously. He demonstrated to them and to Egypt that their gods were no gods at all, that he alone is God. The Israelites plundered Egypt and took all their wealth. Satan, who is the god of this age, wanted to keep Israel in slavery, in bondage. But God not only delivered Israel, but he plundered Egypt. He plundered death and hell and sin through Jesus. He took us out of darkness and slavery and set us free. He demonstrates to the world that he is king. He demonstrates to Satan that he is king every single time someone accepts Christ. It demonstrates to the world, to the gods of this age, to the principalities and powers, that God is king, and they hate it. They will put things in our way to stop us living in freedom. They will make us fight for it. They will cause us to doubt and despair and throw things at us. But we should not try and return to the world. We should not complain about our situation, especially if we had a big hand in it, which some of the times we do. We should not forget everything that God has done for us when things get hard. Christ has bought us our freedom so we can declare to the system of the world, to the world, that Christ has set us free, and we are no longer subject to the yoke of slavery. But we cannot sit back and relax. We will have battles ahead because we have an enemy who wants to plant fear in our hearts and who wants to raise up people to fear us. Satan will do that any way he can to keep us from the freedom that Christ has bought us. Freedom is not free. It comes at a price. Jesus paid the price for us. We need to fight the good fight of faith every step of the way. Amen.